Hi Denmark, can you hear us? Hello, hello?
Yeah, sure, yeah, we hear you.
Okay, so I'm gonna try and share the screen now in 1 second.
You don't know I don't know what's coming.
Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Alright, okay, so I know it's just here ready for his presentation, and I'll pass it to him now. And alright, here you go. Oh, yeah.
You don't bite, do you? You don't bite? No, we can sit up front. Yes, you can. Okay. Yeah, that's all.
Morning. My name's Owen Long from CASA, and they're with this inspector there. This is about the 16th year I've come here and spoken to students. Hopefully give you an overview of what CASA does, and the history of aviation, how we link up with the rest of the world. The reason I put that video on first is because it defies every law of aerodynamics you're ever going to learn. No matter how many times I've seen it, I know that I would have been unconscious for 98% of that flight. And it's awesome, absolutely awesome handling. How the guy's body keeps functioning through that load is totally beyond me. But it's fantastic flipping film. Oops. Yeah, there is one. Come on. Okay. A little bit of history there. It's 3 aircraft I've worked on, well, 2 aircraft I've worked on plus the engine type. And, just a bit of history when Qantas started in Australia. My background and experience, I had 23 years maintaining aircraft, almost 150 different types. I worked in 5 states, 4 countries. I had a LAMI license covering 11 categories as it was on the old system. Non-destructive testing and weight control. In the years I've been in CASA, I've audited about 350 companies right across Australia and in the Solomon Islands. I've done audits with inspectors from all 17 offices we had in the 90s, and with inspectors from America, Europe, Indonesia, Fiji, Solomon Islands, New Guinea. Did 3 type courses in America, 1980 and 2010, done 7 type courses in Australia, and I did balloon maintenance training and flying training in Czech Republic, and flying balloons in a few states. I was just in New South a couple of weeks ago, flying down there, trying to learn a bit more, get a bit better, mainly because if you're audited by someone that knows nothing about what you're doing, it really gets up your nose. I had to do an oral exam on a piston engine with a turbine experienced inspector. He knew nothing about piston engines. It really got up my goat. And then I had to do a helicopter exam with a bloke that knew nothing about helicopters. Well, I was assigned to look after balloons, so I thought, well, I'll learn how to fly them and learn how to fix them. Oops, go back, sorry. Just a little bit of some of the place I worked. New Guinea, Indonesia in the middle, that was my apprentice up the top there. Looking after an ag aircraft. Last aircraft I worked on before I left CASA, and sadly, about 4 months later he was killed. Got the power line. My oldest son on the end of the gantry there came out to help me. Time off, much to the annoyance of my wife. I like to go to air shows. I've been to air shows in England, in New Zealand, in Austria, and Russia, and America. I did 6 flights with Aeroflot in the 1970s. It's interesting just to compare Western and other country aircraft. The Illusion 62 had an incredibly good safety record. It was the last big airline that was purely manual controls. There was no hydraulics in it. It was very, very reliable and had a lower hull loss rate than the Western aircraft. See the undercarriage on that transporter, and one built for skis. The biggest airline in the Western world right now lands at 350 different airports. At its peak, Aeroflot landed at 3,600. Over here, we build airports to suit the aircraft. Under the Soviet Union, they built aircraft to survive on the runways. And so they were built to a different standard to us. Strong, heavy, many undercarriages for poor runways. Different. Airworthiness inspectors. We've got quite a collection of people in our office. We've got 2 from England. Most of the rest of us from Australia. Our experience covers pretty well everything out there. And it used to be that you had to have held a license for 8 years before you could even apply for the job. They've changed that now. Many of us were chief engineers, some of us ran our own businesses, and we had that sort of experience. If you think your exams are hard, by the way, when I did my type exams, we nominated aircraft by serial number, and they would ask you to draw wing attach fitting, draw across section of the wing, draw the hydraulic system showing the direction and pressures, the flows and stuff for it to actuate, and I'm outside with the undercarriage in transit going up. I don't do that anymore, but that's what we had to do to get our license. I think I did 45 exams to get through level 9. What's our role? To ensure safety by oversighting initial applications, make sure that you can operate properly. You've got the tooling, data, facilities, equipment, personnel to do the job. Then we go out and audit the companies, ensure they continue to operate in a safe manner. Audits, we carry out scheduled audits and unscheduled audits around Australia. It's gone through a big change in the last couple of weeks, the way of doing it. We also audit foreign aircraft coming into Australia, and sometimes we do it alone, sometimes in teams, in pairs. And we want to ensure that you're safe, but also following the law. Because if you ever have to go into court, it's not a very nice experience. And we make sure that you're following the laws to keep you safe, hopefully. They can be random, they can be planned. But normally for planned audits, we'll give you about a month's notice of coming to fix up everything. Regulations change continually. Up the top of Kangaroo Cliffs, there's a brick fence. The height for that fence was set a long time ago. The first children born in Australia were 150 millimetres taller than their parents. They're called the corn stalks. Different nutrition, different exercise. How long ago do you reckon the law was set for the height of that fence? 1200 BC. Moses wrote those laws. Don't weigh taller, fatter, heavier. Our centre of gravity is higher, so the law had to be changed to raise the level at that point. But down by the river, if it floods, you don't want the water stuck behind a brick wall, do you? You want the water to be a flow in and out. And it's the same with our regulations. The regulations for an ag pilot flying at 10 feet over a crop is very, very different to what you want for a Qantas or Virgin pilot. And so we do write laws to fit the operation. Early aviation activity. We don't get much publicity about ballooning. Everyone sort of raves, well, about the Wright brothers, but long, long before they ever got even thought of. Some French women were flying balloons. Gina Labossa did about, she did some flights, quite a few. She also did parachuting, 1799. I think 1785, a Frenchman flew a balloon across the English Channel. Marie Blanchard was actually demonstrating at Napoleon's request at times. 14-hour balloon flight's a long time. I think my longest has been 2.5 hours. You're really looking for a toilet after that, I'll tell you. Actually, 14 hours is beyond me. And she did about 70, did quite a few parachute jumps. She was also the first woman who died in an aviation-related accident. Her balloon caught fire, she landed on the roof, that was safe, and then she fell off the roof on the footpath. Poor lady. Charles Green and two friends, or two brothers actually, flew from England to Germany, 1836. And in 1862, two balloonists went over 10,000 metres. It's amazing history, very interesting if you ever want to join, read it. Just say, a lot of people ask, how does a balloon navigate? Well, this was my last flight. Took off from the showground, but you're not allowed to fly over town at a low altitude. So I had to go east, but I wanted to hit that target down the bottom, flew down the side of town, went across. There's 150 feet difference in the wind with those two heights. Going east, it was at 1640, and coming south, it was at 1490 feet. It's amazing to know that there's different air currents so close together that you can follow. So that's how you navigate a balloon, find where the wind are and go with it. Aviation was a bit of a curio, shall we say. The first practical use of it was flying from England to France, 1909, and suddenly people could see the use of it. Otherwise, around Europe there's a lot of good, decent trains long before that happened. First flight in Australia was less than a year later. France was the first country that actually understood the need for international rules. The first helicopter was built 1907. How many of you even conceived that 5 years after the Wright brothers flying, the French had built a helicopter? They had whoops. They had the world's first air show. They had the first flying boat. They called governments together in Europe, obviously, to attend for a conference deciding on how to lay out the laws to cover it. Then after World War I, they had a much bigger meeting because the Americans got involved and some of the South American countries as well. A European meeting in 1926, in America 27, Havana was a big one in 28, covered most of the Latin American and North American countries. In Australia, 1920, Billy Hughes, Prime Minister, asked the states to cede power over aviation to the federal government because he could see interstate trips were going to be a lot quicker than trucks or trains. And he also established the Department of Civil Aviation, or Civil Aviation branch, with Mr. Grimsmead as the first controller. He wasn't an aviator himself, but he was a brilliant leader. I actually have a photocopy at home of a letter he signed as it was going for the bin, and I thought it was quite interesting to keep. Air freight's very important. In 16 years, that company carried 74,000 tonnes of freight. They took dredges up into the north, into the mountains of New Guinea, broken down into small lumps to go into the top of that aircraft. Now, air freight covers about 2 million tonnes a week. That's enormous, man. Two guys I know, my boss actually, his son is flying a freighter in the US, and a layman in Toowoomba's got a son flying them. He did his apprenticeship and decided he wanted to fly. Now he's flying 747 freighters around the world. The changes over the years, the Constellation, 2 tonnes of fuel per hour, 85 passengers at about 260 knots. They made 560 and there were 38 fatal accidents. The A330, they've now built about 1,550. There's been 2 commercial fatal accidents, burning 5 tonnes an hour, 470 knots. So it's one of the reasons for the reduction in costs, obviously. But the DC-4, 23 hours of maintenance per hour flying, 777-13. So the maintenance cost is down by 95% on an aircraft that carries 5 times as many passengers and flies twice as fast. Worldwide, fatality rate this year has been spectacularly low. It's running at about a quarter of what it was the last 5 years, which is great. ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, oversights aviation in the world by agreements, but not by law. We sign up to work with them. It came about, obviously the aircraft production expanded enormously in the Second World War. American, in 42 months, they made 100,000 fighters and 98,000 bombers. 34 months, 36 months, something like that. No, sorry, 43. Absolutely awesome production, and they realised it was going to go into civil work, so the governments decided that after the war we're going to have international agreements, and so came into force 1947. There's now 190 countries that are members of it, and all the states meet every 3 years in total, but there's lots and lots of committees that make other decisions. Present council, with the states of chief importance in air transport. You might wonder why Australia's in there. Really, we're just in the bottom end of the world, small population, but our air services cover something like 25% of the world's surface, all the way heading west towards South America, up towards India, north and south. That's one of the reasons. states that have the largest contribution to provision of facilities for international aviation. And then the last one is the countries are picked so that there's representation from all over the world rather than just the big ones. So that in small countries that have very little aviation, if you take Bolivia and Chile, El Salvador, we really call them powerhouses of aviation, but it's, they are part of it. So it's a fairly democratic group in that way. Our rules, all laws in Australia must abide by the Constitution. Under the Constitution, Acts of Parliament are passed. Now, Act of Parliament carries jail penalties if you disobey them. The law is actually read in Parliament so that everyone can hear it, so they tend to be short. The civil aviation regulations and the civil aviation safety regulations are much more extensive. They're not read, they're placed on a table in the Parliament and the members can read it or get the offsiders to read it and then they vote on that. But the other material, CASA can issue them, provided in accordance with the regulations and of course with the Act, and can't change the Constitution. We tie up with ICAO, but there's a broken line there because we don't have to agree with ICAO. Right now there's some ludicrous number like 6,000 different points where we don't follow ICAO. One of the things is under ICAO, a person gets a licence at 18, in Australia we say 21. So we follow a difference on that. I'm not sure how you can be an 18-year-old with 4 years experience. Yeah. So, Department of Transport Region Services is the advisor of the Minister of Aviation. The overarching law is the Civil Aviation Act, as I said. CASA was established under that. We must have regard to the safety of air navigation as our most important function. We've been one of the great innovators in aviation. We have led the world very much in safety, way before, way in front of most other countries. We had some of the most brilliant men in the world in our aviation. There's about 70 different aircraft designed and built here, and most of you never would have heard of them. The department was based in Melbourne, and the airlines were there, and the manufacturing was there, so there was a lot of direct interaction between the two. 1972, 74, something like that. 74, I think the government decided that CASA, or the aviation regulator, was not a technical body, it was a bureaucratic body, so they shifted the headquarters to Canberra. Sadly, that's happened all over the world. Boeing shifted their management headquarters out of Seattle to Chicago and out of Virginia, separated from the actual work going on. So decisions made by people not directly involved in it. When you're an engineer and when you're a regulator, if you work on your own, you're not going to learn a lot, eh? Just this week I had a phone call from an operator who's concerned about his opposition, and it's not bitchiness of that. This guy works on his own, and he says he doesn't have any interaction with other people to make suggestions of how we can improve. And, I've certainly seen that companies I audit where you've only got one person working there. Part of our role is to educate them and give them guidance. In I cut some of that slide out. In 1945, an aircraft lost a wing on the way to Melbourne, and the coroner's inquest, they said Australia had determined a safe life on all metal aircraft. Well, there was no actual figures on how it happened. All these aircraft were spared at the end of the war, not these ones, but there was roughly 87 of them and 212 wings. After that coronial, Aeronautical Research Lab asked the government if they could destroy them, because the deal that America gave to us, we had to use them for the war. At the end of the war, we had to pay for them, give them back, or destroy them. We couldn't keep them for nothing. We didn't want to pay for them. The Yanks didn't want them back, so the deal was to destroy them. They destruction tested these, and they got perfect empirical data on metal fatigue, which was shared with the world, and all those tables, you can download them off the internet if you can understand them, and all aircraft designed in the world now use those figures. And here's somebody here, the tests, the specimens, and if you look at the variation in the bottom one here, 4,448,000 cycles, one above it's nearly 800,000. This one down here, it started off on a crack, which stress relieved it, so it lasted a long time. But how do you make sense of that? Because I can't. But those guys were so brilliant, and I mean brilliant. They looked at the design of the 747 before Boeing cut metal, and they said, they're going to crack in section 41 at these number of hours and cycles. What do you reckon Boeing said? Nah, they're wrong. Guess what? They were exactly right where the cracks appeared. They looked at drawings, and they were within 5% of the predicted time it happened. One of our gentlemen, Paul Torkington, wrote to Boeing roughly 3 months before the Aloha 737 lost its lift, and told them how and why it was going to happen. I have a copy of the letter Boeing wrote back. You're wrong. Our engineers looked at it. Very embarrassing in the coronial inquest, because they had the letter from him saying it was going to happen, and the letter from Boeing saying it wasn't. He was right. Because of that knowledge of fatigue in metal, we put lives on lots and lots of aeroplanes. Most countries don't really like that idea. Seriously, the Americans take the view, you take the risk if you die or your family sues the manufacturer. Australian law says you should make a profit in the first place. So there is a very different philosophy in our rules. It's the one about the multi-site failures on this here. Wouldn't have been very much fun on that flight. Like I said, the guys that did all that metal research were absolutely brilliant. Service difficulty reports. When you find a problem with an aircraft, you're required to notify us. We notify the manufacturer, other regulators, and we work out if there's a problem. I was driving home this night when I was working in Sydney, and we actually looked after a Avion's Robin, and on the radio it come up that this girl had crashed and been killed. The joist weld bottom broke, she lost control and died on Monday. On Wednesday there was an AD of 9 surviving aircraft in Australia, including one we looked after. 6 of them had cracks in that same weld. We used an AD on the Piper Navajo tailplanes. I remember one operator rang me up and started abusing me, and I said, have you checked your aircraft? I don't need to. Guess what? 3 airplanes, 2 had cracks. So that's the reason why if you find problems, you need to report it. My count in 1966 was about the second last major airline crash in Australia. And the sad bit was the pneumatic pump, magnesium pump caught fire, but there have been 722 defects and 4 other fires around the world, but no one was actually sharing the information. I got a phone call late on a Friday night. A helicopter had a medical equipment blow up. This spring, so I went there to look at it. PA hospital midnight. We worked out that it was an defective battery that someone had put in there. As you realise, corrosion is a big problem in aviation. I can tell you, growing up in Alice Springs, the first 10 years of my working life, never really saw corrosion. Then when I come to coast, what's this white stuff? This is a DC-9. American Airlines operated a total of about 400 of them. Where that rear jack hooks on it, right above it is the toilet and the galley. Corrosion. you would have thought after you had about 400 of these airplanes, you would be really careful with corrosion in that area particularly. So even the company that had that enormous amount of experience still made that stuff up. Two light aircraft, top one's a Piper. They use a steel plate on aluminium and they don't put any corrosion protection in there. And some people looked closely and found that this is off a Cessna 182 that was parked west of Cunnamulla. So the fact that it's so far out in the desert doesn't stop it getting corrosion. Inspection intervals are determined by when it's likely to be detectable. We had one propeller type here, every 200 hours you had to take the blades out and check the hull. One operator decided after about the third time they'd taken them out, oh, this is crap, we don't need to do it, so they decided that without approval, they'd go to 400 hours. At about 300 hours, one blade spat out. So the idea of those two vertical lines is we put a number of inspections in that section when you can see the crack or find the crack. If you suddenly decide to extend it, not a good idea because it might have gone in the failure zone. One example is that's the Cessna undercarriage legs, high strength spring steel. The flight they crack on, they break. It's a vertical line from when the crack starts till it fails. There's no point taking them out and making flux and inspecting them. But other materials like 2024T3 aluminium grows very, very slowly. So obviously the inspection interval on aluminium is going to be different to that type of aluminium is different to other types. So that's part of the metal fatigue and the inspection process. The 7000 series alloy will corrode faster and it'll crack faster. So that's how we work out the inspection intervals. When you have defects, someone did a shoddy job drilling out a river. You can see the double line. It developed a crack. The woman pilot was concerned because that's a sealed wing, fuel leaking out of it. There'd been, 7 reports of fuel leaks in the week, and it's only doing short flights. And she said to her husband at lunchtime, she said, I'm sick of the bad maintenance. She said, I'm putting my resignation. After lunch, she went on the flight, the wing broke, and she and 20 others were killed. Design changes. We find out these problems. That's the screw jack on a T-tail on the trim. In 1980, when the Russian aircraft, the Yak-42, had that fail, they told the world, they grounded their fleet for nearly 2 years, redesigned it. And sadly enough, the arrogance tends to make people not listen to other countries sometimes. In 2000, an American, Alaska Airlines one had exactly the same failure. And the modification was to put that little U-bolt over the top so the screw couldn't come out. But they had 20 years warning of weak spot, but ignored it. Very sad. So we should learn from other people in other countries. 707, when they made it bigger, they extended the tailplane and they put the third spar in the middle. Makes it stronger. And the trouble is, the metal they used in the middle one was different to the other two, so the type of bending in the metal was different. And this was a Dan Air aircraft at the time. I have a friend that was working on it. Everyone was suspicious of the airplane. They'd taken holidays when it was going to be finished, so they weren't there to sign it out. You can see the crack growth right there, 16,500 hours, got that far, another 430, it came off, and it was coming into Lasaka, and just as they dropped full flaps, the tailplane broke off. So it was a nice strong tail, but the trouble is, too strong. What's the weakest link in aviation? Us people. Factors in maintenance errors and human factors in about 80% of the accidents. Now, we've made engineering improvements, made aircraft better. We've introduced safety management systems, better inspection processes. We've dropped the accident rate to an incredibly low rate. How many airliners do you think have crashed in the last 10 years? Jet airlines. Does anyone want to guess?
50 odd.
There's been 16 crashed. There's been 3 shot down and 3 hijacked or crashed by suicide. That's not a real lot of accidents when you consider there's 35 million flights a year. So we've come a long way in the design, but it's human factor. You people now do human factors training. We never had it. We never even mentioned it when I went through. Okay? So that's a good thing. If you're not trained properly, you're not really good at doing your job. The guy was getting a bit better as he got up the wall. But that's why training is important. Taxiing aircraft, it's quite dangerous. Each one of them was basically ignorance, not properly trained to do that. There's millions, tens of millions of dollars damage there. This one here, Japan Airlines, and there was another one similar, I'll show you. They had a tail scrape and they repaired it. You can see that what it should have been at the top picture, the bottom picture, instead of that middle plate being a single piece, for some reason or other, Boeing's own repair team used 2 pieces there. So of course it's got a weak spot there on that very sudden change in thickness. And many years later, it failed and 520 people died. This one, again, was another 747. It was the last flight for the company getting disposed of. Several months before, they did a major check. When people smoked in airplanes, nicotine was always left those dirty brown stains where there was an air leak. So it was a real easy thing to find the leak. It lasted about 18 years. After they did the dodgy repair, they're supposed to replace the skin, but they just put a plate over the damaged bit. It failed, and 225 people died. You've got to read the instructions, and the decal's got to be clear. 88 on the nose leg. The bloke thought it was 88 bar, not 88 psi. Another part. It's one reason why decals are important in reading your manuals. Luckily, no one was killed in that. It would have been a spectacular disintegration. Homemade tools. A compressor washing tool sitting right under the rotorblade. A Bell 214 ST blade is $1 million. The boss is probably not going to be happy with you. But let me tell you, I worked in a company where we had to refuel aircraft quite a bit after changing fuel tanks. Our scabby storeman saved $150 by buying a cheaper pump. I buggered my elbow. I lost 95% of the strength in this arm. Operations, physio, years and years of recuperation. The amount of bill was about $150,000 for $150 saving by buying cheap equipment. And the worst part was, when I finally demanded the right gear, we saved over $110 in labour the first time we used it. So you've really got to be provided with the right tooling. Someone didn't have a good checklist today. This one here, bloke was a 747 pilot. He bought this aircraft, flew it up from Adelaide to Toowoomba. He was flying back down to Moree, and he didn't arrive. His father rang up his friends in Toowoomba, who went down looking, and there was the wreckage straight along the road. The guy decided to cut the exhaust pipe off short because it used to stick out through the bottom, and the owner thought it'd make it go faster by cutting it off. Well, the trouble was, the corner of it was rubbing on the firewall right between his feet, put carbon monoxide in there, killed him. Illegal mod, there's a reason why they put the exhaust out the bottom. Very sad. Some airlines are not real good. This aircraft landed in Germany. One engine, 747, had the front fan secured by cargo straps. The Germans weren't really impressed. This is just downright slack inspection. You can see the inspection over this on a light aircraft, so it happens there too. That cable's not in a good state. Could have easily been fixed. This one here, the worksheets were deficient, and so it didn't include check the dump valves. They did a big check on this aircraft, and it was running over time, and the boss said to the foreman, he was in his face, and he said, if that's not ready to fly in 30 minutes, you're sacked. So they rushed out there, did the pressurisation check, but the dump valves were still not closed. Everyone blames him for doing it, but the fact is the worksheets were deficient, and you don't tell someone they're going to be sacked if it's not ready in a set time. And look, hangars are dangerous places. You do workplace health and safety as part of your course. It wasn't in ours. I had a fall off of aircraft in 1976, and I was told I'd never be able to work again. Didn't sound like a real good thing to me. I damaged my elbow. We were using MEK for cleaning, told it was quite safe. And in the 91, I was having so much trouble, the doctors were talking about doing a double kidney transplant on me. I didn't like that idea either. I didn't need them, but I'm super sensitive to some chemicals and some drinks. A couple of weeks ago, I had a can of Placido after I'd been working in my shed and I was dehydrated. 5 days off work. So the chemicals you use can have a very bad effect on you. Make sure you've got the MSDS. Now I'll tell you one other thing. Whoever you work for, make sure you're covered by workers' comp. 2 back injuries, my kidney troubles, weren't covered by workers' comp. Because the company wasn't covered and they weren't reporting. Not real good. Fortunately, as I said, you people now, you get informed, trained, workplace health safety, occupational health and safety, and it's good for you. It wasn't in my day. When you leave here, it doesn't matter whether you want to work on the biggest helicopter in the world or one of the small ones, little tiny aircraft, or an A380. People in that are putting their life in your hands. And I'll tell you what, when you get told when you get back to work one day, while the Twin Otter crashed and people were killed on it, it's not a good feeling. How did it happen? Like flew in a mountain, it wasn't anything we did wrong, thankfully, but it's not good. It's a serious job. People are trusting you with their lives. Nobody knows who does the maintenance of the aeroplane, by the way. You walk down the street and ask, oh, fix it. Oh, really? Everyone knows about pilots. But maintenance engineers are sort of work in the dark. But your responsibility is very great. Now, finished. On the time I've given. Previous years has been a 90-minute presentation, so I had to cut it down a lot by the way, because they wanted me to give you time to ask questions.
Do you guys have any questions for Mr. Arnold today? Feel free to. It's a 10 minutes Q&A session.
How often does CASA talk to the education departments to like ensure that the training materials that are provided are actually useful and up to date with the industry?
I'd like to keep my job. I'll pass that question.
Thought so, yeah.
And Rover is talking to the Federal Ministry about that now. I was talking to them last week. It's a serious concern.
Should be.
It is. It's very embarrassing when the Australian licence is not accepted in Bangladesh, but anyone is.
Yeah, they come here and train, which is interesting, but yeah.
Yeah, I did like your old system better. If you wanted a licence, you came to me. I would go to your workshop, I would talk to you, I would assess your experience. It doesn't happen now. I can't get with the times because I don't like it.
Fair enough.
I've been told that even yesterday. That's the way it is in the future, but not everything is better. I cannot tell you how to get a licence. I can't honestly tell you how to do it. Previous years I've gone through every part of it all the way through. We have a separate section that looks after it. We have one guy in Brisbane now by the name of Scott Lewis. Answer questions like that. He was actually a lecturer to me many years ago, but it's no longer here with this inspector's job. Companies And look, my first job, I finished year 12 exam on Monday. I started working in the hangar on Tuesday, 30th November 1971. The company would send me Alice Springs, Adelaide, Perth, Indonesia, Singapore. But one day, in December 77, I decided this aircraft was unsafe and I wasn't going to sign it out, so out the door. It happened twice more, where I refused to sign that aircraft. I knew were unsafe. I went to court front for dismissal, and when I walked in to me when those blokes came to support me, that was so nice, knowing that the department supported me. It was good to know them personally. Just sitting down doing exams with them, all this stuff. But honestly, if any of you want to talk to me, I've had students from here bring their parents to talk to me. I've had parents coming to see me. I believe safety comes from you people doing your job properly. No law ever makes something safe. It depends on the integrity of the person doing the job. And if you need help, guidance, seriously, I communicate with people in 22 different countries. Colombia, Myanmar, Kenya. Kenyan AWI wrote to me recently asking me to help develop certificate airworthiness and audit ramp checks for balloons. Canadian woman wanted to issue an Australian guy a licence. I'd given him his licence. He'd moved to Canada, was getting married. She wanted to give him his Canadian licence before the wedding. Russia, Czech, Poland, UK. It does make the job interesting. It really does. But as I said, it's people that make things safe, not rules and regulations. Yes.
Hi, do you have any comments about like hobby drones? Because like they're so widely available now, and you know people can build their own drones, and these things can go like really high up. Like, what's is CASA working on that? Or?
We have this very true. In fact, we have more people in our past looking after drones than we have in airworthiness looking after aircraft. There's tens of thousands of them. I was actually supposed to fly a balloon yesterday morning, but things got stuffed up. But the guy I was going with does audits for bars, and he's supposed to be going to Kazakhstan to audit drone operations over there. So the world does take them seriously. They are magnificent, some of them. I'm so impressed. Helicopters are going to lose out a lot. You know, they do power line patrols with helicopters. When I was in Russia in 2016, they showed me this drone. It fitted into a normal suitcase. At that time, it was $20,000. It could fly 100-kilometre return trip. And the photography was so incredible quality, it would take 2.5 hours to download the images. But it had all the contours of the ground, so they could plan for sewage lines, water lines, power poles. They could inspect the power poles. Big bushfires in California a couple of years ago when a lot of people died. The greenies had stopped them trimming the trees near the power lines. So they caught fire. So the CEO of the power line company got prosecuted for manslaughter. So, well, hang on, I'm not allowed to trim them. But an Australian company got the job. They had so many months to film the entire electrical grid in California. They were the only ones properly equipped to do it. But when you see it, you know, you can look at the crossbars and you can see the timber deteriorating. And so they've got it all on record, and they know which poles to go out and fix and which trees to trim from the power line. So the drones are going to be a big thing, but I do worry about it. A lot of the people that fly and have no concept of what it could do to a normal aircraft if there's a collision.
What's the height that CASA starts worrying about drones? Is it 500 feet?
Don't know.
Yeah.
It's also half a kilo or 200 grams.
It's half a kilo, and then just depending on airspace.
Right. My son's builds bridges, and he's also building his house right now, and he's got a tiny drone. He goes up and takes photos of it. When they're building the bridge up at Cloncurry, it's fantastic to see from above. Previously, you get a helicopter to do it. And the real estate people in Townsville, they had a aircraft they used to fly over the properties and that. Now, of course, he just sits there, takes their photos. So they are, I'm not real fussed on them, but I think they're certainly going to take over a huge amount of work from other areas of aviation. They're lifesavers. Send the drone out, they can look for sharks, they can look for people in trouble, they can drop life jackets to them, all that sort of stuff. You just couldn't afford to do it any other way. So. And when we're in Canberra, my daughter-in-law sits there and next minute this drone comes along with a little pack of food for a dog, you know. It was amazing.
Is there a reason Australian engineering licenses aren't recognised like in other places, or able to be converted easily? Is it just because we've deviated so far from other accepted practices, or?
Well, yeah, that's part of it, but also the fact that we filed a difference with ICAO over licenses